Welcome to Bibliocultus, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. In this episode, I'm going to go over the Discourse on Method and the Meditations of Rene Descartes. But before we begin, please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. It really helps the channel out. Please note that I do put information on the bottom of the screen that kind of scrolls through, and a lot of this information is just extra definitions and additional information that I think could be helpful. So I know it could be distracting sometimes, but if you're interested in that information, then just read it and then you can go a little bit back in the video and start again where I left off. And I think that'll be an easy way of being able to do both. But again, it's always ancillary information that is not necessarily crucial to the video. So hopefully that clarifies the way I use that feature in the bottom. Now, the Discourse on Method and the Meditations by Rene Descartes. Now, this version, I have it since I was in undergrad, so it is an old edition. At the time that I bought it, it was already an old edition. Anyway, it was a second-hand, already used up, but it was not marked, and that's why I got it. This is from Penguin Books and copyrighted in 1968. I'm not 100% sure if this was printed in 1968, but that is the only date that I can find in the book, so therefore I'm going to have to assume it. And like I said, when I bought it, it was already an old, used book. Now, this edition is very nice though, because it contains both of these books in one place and a very good introduction. But like I always say, the content is the most important aspect of a book, so if you can find another edition, either together or separate, doesn't matter, because I'm just going to do a content review here. So Descartes' purpose was to present an alternative to scholasticism. That was really his main goal. So as you go through the book, you will realize that what he's trying to argue is that the scholastic method is already passé, it's already old, and that it didn't really solve a lot of the basic issues that philosophy was confronting. He basically felt that Western philosophy would benefit from having a single edification that would hold the entire basis of philosophy in one single method, based on a single mind, because he actually argues that philosophical systems that are basically a chimera of sorts that contains the thoughts of multiple thinkers throughout time and space. And he felt that these kinds of mixed in together conceptions did not breed out a very clear-cut conceptual framework for philosophy. So he had a very high aspiration and ambition to present to Western civilization an actual system as an alternative to scholasticism. Now, obviously, Descartes is famous for his cogito, which is the presupposition that I think, therefore I am. That is his most famous expression. And most people, when they think of Descartes, they think of this. And basically, it is a presupposition on the idea that the mere thinking assumes a separation of the mind from the body, and that he is unable to fathom any other way of perceiving existence without first perceiving himself. And he actually arrives at this via a negative proposition, because he was trying to pretend that he did not possess a body, that he would pretend that he did not have any clear ideas, even that all thought was false itself. But the one thing he couldn't pretend was that he didn't think or exist. In other words, every pretending that he was attempting to do, every type of fantastical approach to alternative ways of visualizing existence, always contained the thinking part, and therefore he comes to the conclusion that he must be, because he cannot fathom anything outside of just being, of thinking. Now, he doesn't go as deeply as Heidegger would go in these explorations, but I would argue that this is the basis of the very notion this thought implies existence. Now, of course, there are other possibilities. In other words, there are other conceptions that could explain thought, but he simply uses this as the basis for his entire philosophical system. Now, it is important to be clear because Descartes is usually seen as a solipsist, that he did believe in universal objective truth. And he did believe that if a mind simply followed the rules of logic, the infrastructure of reason, then he would be able to know all truth and all knowledge. He saw it as mathematics. And he uses the example of a child that the moment he can follow the rules of math and he can make certain equations, he will always know the absolute truth of that equation, irrespective of his amount of knowledge, irrespective of anything else. The mere application of the rules of the infrastructure of thought was sufficient to know it all and to have access to all truth. And of course, this leads to the presuppositions of the scholastics as well, who are ardent proponents of natural theology, which is this basic idea that God designed reality, the world, the earth, the universe, in a way in which creatures could analyze and visualize and study reality itself, and via this method know God. Because God put symbols and codes and secrets within reality and nature and created rules and laws of nature that can be studied, and from thence you can arrive at absolute truth and concrete conclusions. Interestingly enough, all science presupposes the same, so that the very notion of science stems from natural theology. And if you remove from science these axioms, then you cannot even do experimentation. The entire infrastructure of science requires this knowledge and requires this notion. So Descartes is not moving too far from scholasticism, and science hasn't either, which is very fascinating. Now, I did find interesting that one of the rules of thought in his method is that one must follow the customs and the religion of his culture as a basis for any exploration. He believes that it will be impossible to step outside of your own background and cultural influence, and therefore, if you just assume the basic conceptions of your culture, especially of those who are the most reasonable, the most balanced, then you can use that as a vehicle to explore beyond that point. So he's not restrained by that, because he actually goes through an exercise of denying everything that he knows, or at least attempting to therefore reconstruct to find what is true. So he's not advocating just blind following of dogmas or culture, but he's arguing that because it's inevitable, then we should assume it and be comfortable with that assumption, because we're going to do it anyway. Might as well be conscious of it. Another aspect of that method is that he argues that you must observe how people behave and not so much what they believe, because he argues that not only do most people don't know what they believe, but then most people will act in concordance with what they actually believe than what they claim to believe. And this is a very Catholic notion, I would argue, because in that point of view, it is really your behavior that affirms your faith. The traditional Christian viewpoint has always been that faith without works is dead. That faith implies behavior that conforms to a belief. That belief by itself is not sufficient. And in the ancient world, there was no separation between this nominal conception. There was no nominal thinking like that, meaning they wouldn't separate behavior from belief, because your behavior was a reflection of your belief. And he's manifesting this notion already by arguing that it's best to observe behavior instead of just hearing so-called slogans and dogmas from people. So again, his argument is, I could pretend not to be the body. I could pretend that I was not in this space and time. I can pretend so many things, but I cannot pretend to not exist. Just the act of pretending itself is an act of existence. And he comes therefore to the conclusion that I must exist. I mean, that's the basis of the cogito. Another aspect that I think it's important is that he argues that to him, it's impossible to tell the difference between a dream state and an awakened state. And this reminds me of Vedanta and a lot of this Eastern philosophy, although I've reviewed books on Islamic philosophy, which in a lot of ways influenced even scholasticism, like Averroes, etc., and Ibn Arabi, who also posited notions of existence stemming from Greek philosophy, that there might not be much of a difference between the dreamscape and the actual state of being. And in the East, this is called Maya or illusion, which doesn't necessarily mean that things are false. It just simply means that they are not what they seem, that there's an element of heavy-handed perception from the mind when it comes to what it assumes is true and not true, or even perception of death and perception of time, and all these things are variable. So the fact that he goes into that, you'll enjoy that in the book. Now, I like that he calls himself a thing that thinks. For some reason, every time I read that from Descartes, I think of H.P. Lovecraft, simply because I think that name would be a perfect title for one of his short stories, A Thing That Thinks. And of course, he wonders, is there anything outside of myself if I'm a thing that thinks? And again, I think that would have made a great story as well. Just that exploration, there's something of cosmic horror in this notion. At least that's the way I perceive it. Now, of course, he does end up at the position of a God-affirming philosopher, meaning he arrives at God in the thought itself because he believes that if he can think of perfection, then there must be a first cause and a prototype of perfection, and that one must be God. So there must be something thinking this, and there must be something causing it, and therefore that something must be God. And if I think and I exist, the mere thinking implies the existence of God, and therefore there's a first cause thinker. And through this method, he arrives at the belief that it is impossible to not have God and existence. And let me quote a part of this work that I think encapsulates a little bit of this.
Now, if I were independent of all other existence, and were myself the author of my being, I should certainly doubt nothing. I should conceive no desires. And finally, I would lack no perfection. But I should have given myself all those perfections of which I have in me some idea, and thus I should be God.
So you see there, by using that methodology, he arrives at the notion that there must be a first cause mind that thought all of this, and therefore we are simply an emanation of this, which again leads them somewhat away from the Abrahamic conception of God, and in my opinion puts them a little bit closer to the ancient philosophers and also to the Eastern philosophers. And finally, he believed that civilization equals philosophy because without philosophy, you simply cannot have anything. And he does have a political bent in his work, like most works at the time, because he's arguing for the Platonic conception of philosopher kings, just like almost all thinkers at the time, and that you can categorize cultures based on their philosophical content. Now, the only thing I would somewhat clarify on that point is that if you study all cultures, including the ones that he probably call primitive, you do actually find philosophy. You're just not going to find it the way that he expects, because most cultures have some form of theological infrastructures and presuppositions and myth superstructures, and all myth contains philosophy, and all you have to do is study them. And once you study them deeply, you realize that there's plenty of philosophy that is being presented and utilized to justify and explain existence. And therefore, based on that premise, most cultures, if not all cultures, contain philosophy. And then the question there is simply which type. So Hopefully you enjoyed this review. Again, find any edition that you can and read this book, because it is a classic of Western civilization and it is a pivot point in Western thought. And it would really, at the same time at least, encourage you to explore these topics further beyond this point. So please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. It really helps the channel out to grow and to get to more people that might find this topic and all the other topics that I discuss in this channel interesting. So thank you for being with me. See you next time.